NFL news and notes now with John McMullen from 97.3 ESPN.com. He will be at the Alshon Jeffrey press conference coming up at the bottom of the hour. We'll carry it for you live right here on 97.3 ESPN, your home for Eagles football, John. So let's get into it. As we know, Alshon Jeffrey will meet the media at 4:30 today, but Torrey Smith met the media earlier today and indicated that he's got a lot of football left. He's got a lot of speed, and I thought something interesting in his press conference is he said, I know teams still respect me because last year the defenses were still sending their number one corner after me. So he still thinks that he could play. Kind of a little bit of a shot at the 49ers for the lack of use out there in San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean, he was actually very nice to the 49ers as a whole, even complimented Chip Kelly.
Yes, he was.
And things didn't work out. And you mentioned that he often would see number one corners, and that's true when he did play. But understand, you're not going to send a number one corner after Jeremy Curley. So it was one of those things where it's true, but it was true for a reason. And obviously, he's not going to see number one corners this season because Alshon Jeffrey's going to be on the Eagles, and that's going to be very, very helpful to him. No question about that.
Yeah, he also, I think he opened up the press conference virtually, John. The first words that came out of his mouth was Carson Wentz. I mean, he went right to, they have a great quarterback in Carson Wentz. He also kind of gave a hat tip there multiple times to Joe Douglas and the Eagles front office.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Douglas obviously is one of the major reasons he got drafted in Baltimore as a second-round pick. So he's got a lot of familiarity with him. He trusts him. He's very comfortable with him, and I think that was a big part of why he's here. And Howie Roseman, if you remember, going back to the Combine, he said flat out that Carson Wentz is going to be a very big attribute for getting people to come here via free agency. And it's turning out to be true. It's the first thing Torrey said. Alshon Jeffrey wrote a piece for the Players Tribune, and he said Carson Wentz he feels is a potential future MVP. So what Howie said is turning out to be true, and the fact that players see Carson Wentz and they want to come here and play with him.
Yeah, and by the way, as we're talking, Terrell Pryor looking like he's going to Washington. Looks like Terrell Pryor to Washington. I got to get the numbers on that because I'm interested. 1 year, $8 million. So 1 year, $14 million for Alshon Jeffrey. 1 year, $8 million for Terrell Pryor. Which way would you go, John?
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, Alshon's a better receiver. And I mentioned couple days ago with Terrell Pryor, I wouldn't be all that comfortable with him because he's just very raw as a receiver. I mean, he's tremendously athletic. He's very gifted, but he hasn't been playing the position very long, and he's learning it at the professional level on a 1-in-15 team. So that really huge money market that people speculated that would be there wasn't there for Jeffrey, really, and it certainly wasn't there for Pryor.
John, you hinted at the Carson Wentz effect, saying that it can help in other areas too. Can it help in other areas too, or is it just in attracting wide receivers?
No, I think it can help in other areas. I really do, because teams know. I mean, look at I don't want to dare compare Carson Wentz to Tom Brady, but look at everybody's willing to go to New England for a reason, and it's because they think they have a chance to win and a chance to win Super Bowls, and it starts, certainly with the coach, but more so with the quarterback. So if you think somebody's going to develop into a big-time quarterback, you're going to be in it virtually every single year. So I think as we go down, not necessarily this season because the Eagles don't have a ton of salary cap space, but in future years, if Carson develops into a franchise signal caller, it's going to be easier to recruit people.
He mentioned, Howie Roseman today mentioned prorating. He says it has put us in situations to be successful. What kind of credit do you give the capologist of the Philadelphia Eagles?
Well, we'll see, because as I wrote on 973ESPN.com, these numbers don't add up. So Howie says he wants to keep everybody. He wants to keep Jason Kelsey. He wants to keep Benny Logan. And, hey, just from the simple math, when the Eagles sign these contracts and put pen to paper and file the paperwork for the league, they're over the cap. So some moves have to come, whether it's releasing or trading Michael Kendricks or Jason Kelsey or even Darren Sproles. Something has to happen because they've spent more money than they have right now.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN, our Eagles insider, as the press conferences are today. We've already heard from Torrey Smith and Howie Roseman. John, give us your thoughts on the Wisniewski deal. What are the tea leaves that you're reading there?
Well, that was the big tea leaf today when they signed Wisniewski, re-signed him to a 3-year deal. I mean, that indication to me was right off the bat, well, Jason Kelsey's gone. He's out of here, whether via trade or release. And I still think that's going to be the case, although Howie said flat out no. But if you look at the bodies, particularly on the interior offensive line, the Eagles brought in Chance Warmack. Nobody's talking about that. He's a guard. You have Wisniewski, who can play guard and center. You have Sayamalu, who can play guard and center. They claimed Alan Barber. They're not looking to trade him now. How many bodies do you need? At some point, a domino's got to fall.
But offensive line, and you said on our show, and I quoted you on this earlier, that that's the number one position to try and find quality guys. It's so hard to find talent. And Howie, I guess, thinks that the more the merrier, the more you can have that are able-bodied guys.
Well, yeah, and they went through, obviously, a situation last year, which Howie mentioned, that they used 5 right tackles. So it can go south for you really, really quickly. So I understand wanting depth. I understand needing depth, and the Eagles certainly have it right now. The issue becomes you don't have the money to pay for it. So while it's easy to say, you got to get under the salary cap. And if you're not under the salary cap, you're going to be fined. You're going to be penalized with taking away a draft choices. So the Eagles are not going to risk that, obviously. And the point is, somebody has to go. You like everyone. You'd like to keep everyone, but you can't. And that's just the reality where the Eagles are right now.
How about Chance Warmack, John? Played left guard for Jeff Stoutland at Alabama. Is the hope that he regains some confidence and they plug him in at left guard again? Do they view him as a potential starter there? Because he's certainly not going to supplant Brandon Brooks at right guard.
No, and he played right guard in Tennessee, so that's going to be interesting when we get to talk to him to see if he's comfortable enough. I believe he did play left guard at Alabama.
Yeah, he played left guard at Alabama, and all 48 games he played in Tennessee, they all were at right guard.
Yeah. So I think he's comfortable enough. And Howie, what piqued my interest was, much like Jeffrey, Howie claimed that Warmack had other offers for longer term deals that would have been better for him, but he preferred Philadelphia. And a lot of that had to do with reuniting with Jeff Stoutland, his old offensive line coach at Alabama. So hopefully that works out. But that's a very low-risk, high-reward signing because he's got tremendous physical gifts as an offensive lineman. But obviously they haven't panned out to this point. Maybe Stoutland can tap into it. If he doesn't, you only gave him $500,000 of guaranteed money, so it's not going to hurt you from that perspective.
How much, John, can you speak on the comfortability level of playing for a guy that you're familiar with, your position coach in college, your position coach? Because let's throw this out there. 5 years ago, we were not connecting dots to position coaches for the potential success or potential failures of players. This seemingly is something that is new of your surroundings and the guys that you're playing for and feeling comfortable with them.
Well, I'll just say this. You never talk about it with really, really good players because really good players excel no matter what.
That's a good point.
Now, there are guys who...
Although the best years that Alshon Jeffries has had been with Mike Groh.
That's true. But also to that degree, you have to realize he was injured partially in 2015, so that kind of affected his numbers. In 2016, you not only had the PED suspension where he missed 4 games, but you also had 3 different quarterbacks. So you had Jay Cutler, you had Brian Hoyer, you had Matt Barkley, and that can affect a guy. And I think that's what happened more than a position coach for Alshon Jeffrey. I think if he's on the field for 16 games, with a solid quarterback, he's going to put up big numbers. So I'm not as concerned with that with him. But for a guy like Warmack, who seems to have it in his head that he got poor coaching in Tennessee, I think maybe you could tap into something there.
John, when I asked you about Warmack and I said that he's not going to supplant Brandon Brooks at right guard, I thought about the fact that Brandon Brooks was a guy that mysteriously was ill on a couple of occasions. And I guess I want to know from you how much you think that the trials and tribulations of the offensive line last year, is that a direct result of the decisions that they were making yesterday and today?
No, I mean, I think the trials and tribulations of the offensive line had mostly to do with the fact that Lane Johnson wasn't there for 10 games. I really do. I mean, they were one of the better offensive lines in football when Lane was on the field. And if he's not the best right tackle in football, he's certainly amongst the top 2 or 3. So when you lose a player of that caliber, the dominoes start to fall. And we just talked about using 5 different right tackles. And at the end, you move a guy who's playing really well at left guard, Alan Barber, over to right tackle, and you sort of have a deficiency at both positions then. So I think it had more to do than that with that. When the Eagles have their starting 5 from left to right last year, you're talking Peters, Barber, Kelsey, Brooks, Lane Johnson. They were really, really good. Now, individually, Jason Kelsey did not have a very good year. So that's the one guy you look at and say, you really need to improve. And it's pretty evident that the Eagles don't expect a similar year from Alan Barber.
Yeah, I'm interested with Wiz, and then we talked about all the guys. Who do you see? He mentioned today that he doesn't see Kelsey leaving because of what happened with the offensive line last year. Does somebody, in your opinion, have to go?
I do. I do think somebody has to go because, again, I just mentioned all the bodies you have there.
Yeah.
And the guy that's going to get you the most space is Jason Kelsey. So to me, that's the most logical. And you need about, and we haven't even talked about the rookie cap. Remember, the Eagles got to carve out $4.5 to $5 million to sign their rookie class. So this is a situation where they're going to have to, without adding anyone, they're going to have to carve out about $10 million in salary cap space. And I think most of that could come from Michael Kendricks and Jason Kelsey.
And let's remember, Nolan Carroll isn't signed, and they don't really have a corner that is a starting caliber guy on the roster right now.
No, they don't. And I think that's a situation where you're going to have to go in the draft and really, really add there, even if you have to carpet bomb that position and go quarterback round 1, round 2, round 3, because they're not going to be able to add anything meaningful in free agency at that particular position. So they're going to have to address it in the draft, and that's where the strategy comes in, because that's probably the deepest position in this year's draft.
John, did Mike Gill pay you to say that? Because that was his argument yesterday in the 5 o'clock hour that he'd be just fine if they went wide out and then corner, corner, corner in the draft. And he just kept saying corner, corner, corner over and over.
Great minds just think alike, as you know, Pete. But now Mike does his homework. He knows the draft is filled with really, really good corners. And I think that was the Eagles' thought process. Let's go get receivers because there's going to be a lot of corners in the draft.
I'd go, John, and I actually said yesterday, if Mike Williams or Corey Davis or maybe Ross is there at 14, I'd take them there, and I'd go corner, 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 2, 3, 4, because there's enough depth that you can get 3 guys, 2, 3, and 4, and let them battle it out. And I'd probably still look to bring in maybe Carroll back, but some sort of veteran guy to hang out back there with those guys.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get him back at obviously a one-year deal at a reasonable price. And I apologize, there's a blizzard going on in South Philadelphia right now.
It's going on in South Jersey, too.
It's going to be difficult to even add a Nolan Carroll at this point. The Eagles are so up against it salary cap-wise.
All right, John, we know you are heading to the Alshon Jeffrey press conference. Chance Warmack will be there as well. I'll just ask you this question before we let you run. Your top question for Alshon Jeffrey. You're going to be in that room. What is the first question on your mind seeing him being introduced to the Philadelphia Eagles?
Well, I want to know why he went with the one-year deal instead of the multiple-year deal that was reportedly out there with the Minnesota Vikings, and I presume he's going to say Carson Wentz. So it's Carson getting the best of Sam Bradford yet again.
Yeah, and it's funny because Bob Laguerre from the Daily Herald out there in Chicago was on with us earlier, and he said the Bears had more interest in Alshon than Alshon had in him, and you wonder if their quarterback situation was part of the reason.
Oh, it certainly is, because obviously Mike Glennon, and you can say what you want, and maybe there's some hope, but it's really difficult to see him turning into a superstar quarterback, at least early on.
All right, John, we'll let you get to the press conference. We know it's treacherous conditions out there. Thanks for bearing with us throughout it, and we'll have the press conference coming up in 11 minutes here on 97.3. Thanks, John.
All right, thank you, guys.